The Sterling Heights corporate tower gleamed like a mirror under the afternoon sun, all glass, steel, and precision. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, clipped with the sound of footsteps and ringing phones. It was just another day for Rachel Whitmore, the building's operations manager, a woman known for her efficiency and her temper. Security's supposed to anticipate problems, not react to them, she snapped, heels clicking as she strode through the lobby. If tenants are complaining again, someone's getting replaced. Behind the security desk stood Andre Miller, a tall, broad-shouldered man in a crisp uniform, posture straight and calm. He'd been working there for over a year, and most of the staff respected him, not just because he did his job well, but because he carried himself like someone who'd seen worse things than angry executives. Rachel stopped in front of him, arms crossed. "Mr. Miller, do you know why I'm here?" Andre glanced up, his expression composed. "You're here about the parking garage incident, ma'am." "That's right," she said, her tone icy. "A delivery driver claims you detained him for no reason." "He didn't have clearance," Andre replied evenly. Protocol says Protocol says you should know how to handle people," she interrupted. "We're not running a prison. We're running a business. I've had 2 tenant complaints this month, and now this. I think it's time we made a change." Andre's jaw tightened. "You're firing me." Rachel didn't blink. "You're being relieved of duty. HR will handle the paperwork." He stood there for a long moment, looking at her. Not angry, just tired. "You ever think maybe the rules protect more than just property?" She frowned. "Excuse me?" "People get careless when they feel safe," he said quietly. "My job's to make sure they stay safe, even when they don't realize they're in danger." Rachel gave a short, dismissive laugh. "That's poetic, Mr. Miller. But this isn't about philosophy. It's about performance." He nodded slowly, unclipped his badge, and set it on the counter. "Understood." As he turned to leave, Rachel said briskly, "Security will collect your uniform by tomorrow." He stopped just long enough to say, "You should be careful, Ms. Whitmore. The world's not as safe as you think." Then he walked out. No anger, no drama, just quiet dignity. Rachel watched him go, already moving on in her mind to the next problem, the next meeting, the next set of numbers that mattered more than people. She didn't know it yet, but she'd just made a mistake that would come back to her doorstep, literally, because a month later, when she moved into her new gated community on the edge of town, there he would be again, standing at the entrance, uniform crisp, eyes calm as ever. The man she fired was now the man guarding her home. A month later, Rachel's new neighborhood gleamed under a mild spring sun. Pristine lawns, tall oak trees, and white fences that looked more like promises than barriers. She'd finally escaped the noise of the city, the constant stress, the endless cycle of demands. Here she thought she could finally breathe. Her SUV rolled up to the entrance gate of Maple Crest Estates, a luxury housing community where privacy came with a price tag. She lowered her window to greet the security guard on duty, but when he turned toward her, she froze. It was Andre Miller. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the hum of her engine and the distant chirp of birds. His uniform was different now, dark blue with a Maple Crest badge, but his posture was the same, tall, steady, composed. "Good afternoon, Ms. Whitmore," he said evenly, like he'd expected her. "No, welcome home." Rachel blinked, her grip tightening on the steering wheel. You work here?" "Yes, ma'am," he said. "Head of Community Security." The title hit her like a quiet slap. Head. She wasn't looking at a guard anymore. She was looking at the man in charge. She forced a thin smile. "Well, I suppose life's full of surprises?" Andre nodded slightly, scanning her vehicle tag before pressing the button to raise the gate. "Always is, ma'am. Your home's in Section C, second left after the fountain. Have a good evening." She drove through slowly, her heart pounding harder than she cared to admit. Later that evening, as she unpacked boxes in her spotless new living room, she couldn't stop thinking about it, about him. The way he'd looked at her, not with bitterness, not with triumph, just that same calm, unreadable gaze. She told herself it didn't matter. He was just a guard. It wasn't personal. But deep down, it bothered her, because she wasn't used to being the one who felt small. A few nights later, a thunderstorm rolled in. Heavy rain, wind rattling the windows. Rachel was up late working when the power flickered, then died completely. She cursed under her breath, fumbling for her phone's flashlight. Then came a knock on the door. Firm, controlled. Her heart jumped. She peered through the peephole and saw Andre, rainwater streaming off his jacket. "Ms. Whitmore," he called, voice steady over the storm. "You all right?" "Power's out across the block. Transformer blue." She opened the door cautiously. "I'm fine. How did you—" "I make rounds during outages," he said. "Safety protocol. Wanted to make sure you weren't in the dark alone." Rachel hesitated, then stepped aside slightly. "You can come in, just to get dry." He shook his head. "Appreciate it, but I'm on duty." "Got a few more houses to check?" She studied him for a moment. The professionalism, the quiet sense of duty she'd mistaken for pride the last time they'd spoken. "Mr. Miller," she said softly, "I owe you an apology." He met her eyes. "For what, ma'am?" "For firing you. For not listening. For assuming I understood everything from my side of the desk." He gave a small, knowing smile. "You did what you thought was right at the time. Sometimes people don't see the whole picture until it's drawn bigger." She looked down, ashamed. "You must have thought I was awful." "I thought you were doing your job," he said simply. "Now, I'm just doing mine." For a moment, lightning flashed behind him, turning the rain into a curtain of silver. He adjusted his jacket and nodded. "Stay safe tonight. Power should be back soon." And just like that, he was gone again, walking into the storm, steady and sure. Rachel stood there for a long time after he left, the sound of rain filling the silence. For the first time in her life, she realized what dignity really looked like, and it wasn't wearing a suit. The days passed quietly in Maple Crest Estates, and for a while, Rachel almost forgot about the storm and the man who had stood outside her door that night, calm against the chaos. She saw him from time to time at the gate, always professional, always courteous. Each encounter stirred something in her, a mix of respect, curiosity, and something softer she couldn't quite name. Still, she told herself it didn't matter. She was moving on. A new house, a new start. One Saturday night, she stayed late at her office across town. The parking lot was nearly empty when she left, and by the time she reached home, the air was heavy with mist. The streets of Maple Crest were quiet, too quiet. As she parked in her driveway, her headlights swept over something strange, her side gate slightly open. She frowned. She was sure she'd locked it. Stepping out of the car, she felt her pulse quicken. "Probably the wind," she whispered. But the moment she reached the front porch, she froze. The door was ajar. Her throat tightened. "No." She fumbled for her phone with trembling fingers, but before she could dial, a shadow moved inside, a figure in dark clothes, rifling through her living room. For a second, she couldn't breathe. Panic clawed at her chest. Then, instinct took over. She ran back to her car, locked the doors, and hit the security call button on her dashboard, her voice shaking as she spoke to the dispatcher. "Someone's in my house. I'm at 212 Oak Lane. Please hurry." The dispatcher's voice came back calm and steady. "Stay in your car, ma'am. Security's been notified. Help is on the way." Seconds stretched like hours. Then, through the mist, a dark SUV appeared. Lights off, engine low. It pulled up beside her driveway, and from it stepped Andre Miller, his expression hard and focused. Rachel exhaled in a rush, tears stinging her eyes. "Andre!" she cried, opening her car door. "Stay inside," he ordered, his voice sharp but calm. "Lock it. Don't move." He drew his flashlight and sidearm, standard issue for the community patrol, and moved toward the house, every motion controlled, precise. The intruder must have heard him, because a moment later, there was movement, a crash, a door slamming open. Rachel's heart pounded as she watched him disappear around the side of the house. Then came shouting, the sound of footsteps, and finally, silence. Moments later, Andre emerged, gripping the arm of a man in a dark hoodie, handcuffs glinting in the porch light. He walked the intruder to the SUV, radioed the authorities, and only then came back to Rachel. "He's done," he said quietly. "Caught him trying to slip out the back. Looks like he's been hitting houses in this area all week." Rachel stared at him, her eyes wide, her breath still shaky. You could have been hurt." He shrugged lightly. That's the job. You all right? She nodded, then broke down, covering her face with trembling hands. I, I thought I was going to die. Andre hesitated for only a second before stepping closer. You're safe now, he said gently. I promised you the world's not as safe as it looks. But I also told you I'd keep it that way for you. She looked up at him, tears in her eyes. I fired you, and you still came back to protect me. Andre smiled faintly. You don't leave people behind, ma'am. Not when it matters. As the police arrived and the flashing lights filled the street, Rachel realized something she hadn't before, that this man she once dismissed had a kind of strength no title or salary could ever match. And as the cold night air brushed her face, she thought that maybe for the first time in her life, she wanted to be the kind of person who earned his respect. Morning came slowly after the chaos of the night before. The rising sun spilled pale light across the quiet street, touching the police tape that still fluttered near Rachel's porch. She hadn't slept. Not really. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the shadow of that man inside her house, and the calm strength of the one who had stopped him. By 7 a.m., she'd made up her mind. She brewed a pot of tea, her hands trembling only slightly, and looked out the window toward the gatehouse down the street. Andre Miller was there, as always. Even after the long night, he stood tall, uniform neat, movements deliberate. The kind of steadiness that seemed impossible after what he'd done. Rachel took a deep breath, poured 2 mugs of tea into thermoses, and walked down the path toward the gate. When he saw her approaching, Andre straightened. Mrs. Whitmore, he said politely, you didn't have to come down. I already filed my report. She smiled faintly. I know. I just thought you might want some tea. You've been up all night. He blinked, surprised. You brought tea for me? Yes, it's not much, but it's hot. She held out the thermos. Chamomile, no sugar. He took it with a small nod, the hint of a smile tugging at his mouth. You remembered. I pay attention, she said softly. Sometimes. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The morning air was crisp, the world still half asleep. Then, Rachel said quietly, you really didn't have to go back in that house. You could have waited for the police. Andre sipped his tea before answering. And risk him getting to you? No, ma'am. I've seen what happens when you wait too long. There was a gravity in his tone, the kind that only comes from experience. Rachel studied him carefully. You said you've seen worse. Military? He nodded. Army. 14 years. Came home and needed work. Security felt familiar, she sighed. And then you ended up working for me. Until I decided I knew better. Andre smiled softly. You made a call. That's what leaders do. Sometimes you learn after the fact. You did. She looked down, ashamed. You've every right to hate me. I don't, he said simply. Hate's heavy. I learned to travel light. That made her laugh. A real laugh, unguarded. You talk like a philosopher again. He shrugged, smiling. I just talk like someone who's been through storms. She hesitated, then said, you know, I thought moving here would make me feel safe. But last night I realized safety isn't about gates and alarms. It's about people. It's about trust. Andre met her gaze. Then you're already safer than most. For a long moment, they just stood there, the noise of the waking neighborhood fading around them. Rachel could feel something shift between them. Not gratitude, not pity, understanding. Finally, she said, Andre, I'm serious about making things right. You deserve more than a thank you. I want to recommend you for the community's head of security contract. Officially. He raised an eyebrow. I already hold the title. I mean your company, your own firm. You could run security for the entire district. I can help you get the contracts, the funding, everything. Andre looked stunned for a moment, then thoughtful. You don't owe me that, Ms. Whitmore. She smiled. I know. But maybe I owe myself the chance to do something right. He chuckled quietly, shaking his head. You've changed, you know. Maybe I just finally started seeing people, she said. They finished their tea in silence, watching the sunlight spread across the quiet street. When Rachel finally turned to go, Andre called after her, Thank you for the tea. She smiled over her shoulder. Thank you for the life. And as she walked back toward her house, she felt something new settle over her. Not fear, not guilt, but peace. the kind that only comes when you realize the person you once dismissed might just have been the one holding your world together all along.